If you take a look around you, why is not everyone walking around with a perfect six-pack or $1 million in their bank account? These days, I argue it's mostly not a lack of knowledge, but mainly a lack of ability to persist and to keep pushing when things actually get hard. Because we all know that initial excitement that we have when we start a new project, we have a blank page in front of us and we just simply have a fresh start. But unfortunately, this is not where success lies, because everyone can do that. Success is really about persisting the valley of death. And you usually enter the valley of death after the initial excitement of a fresh start has died down and you're just left with hard work. In this phase, your motivation is generally very low, external rewards are absent, and you're wondering what the hell you're doing with your life. It's exactly about those moments when all of your friends are going out and they ask you if you want to join, but you just can't because you're stuck with doing the stupid thing that you put onto yourself. And therefore, in this video, I want to talk about the hidden superpower of delaying gratification, and how we can train our brain to keep pushing no matter what life throws at you. Just by mastering this one simple skill, you will be able to numb your senses and to climb out the valley of death in order to reap the rewards that are on the other side. So let's dive into it. Hi, I'm Simon and I'm your accountability partner. And my task is to hold you accountable to reach your goals. Because I believe that consistency wins, but accountability will actually get you there. And before we dive into the exciting topics of delaying gratification, I want to ask you one thing, and that is to subscribe to my small YouTube channel. On this channel, I will upload weekly videos about accountability, how to build healthy habits, and how to actually reach your goal. So if you're interested in those kind of topics, please hit subscribe and join the community. Also, if you want to reach a goal within the next 30 days, I have a free template for you that you can download below. In the template, we have broken down productivity to the main idea, which is to simply make progress every day towards your goal. And you can track it easily with the template below. So go ahead and download that for free, but now that this is out of the way, let's dive into the video. Delaying your gratification basically means that we're delaying something that feels good right now in this very moment to something that actually matters later. We basically accept a little bit of pain right now in order to feel better down the line, instead of constantly giving in what feels good right in this very moment and paying the cost later down the road. The underlying idea with delaying your gratification is basically that if we constantly give in to the path of least resistance, we will end up in the worst spot than we started. One very straightforward example could be eating fast food every single day versus cooking something healthy at home yourself. It will feel great in the moment when you finally bite into that burger or you feel the crunchiness of the fries, but eventually, long-termly, we will pay the price for that, which is usually health issues and also often in my case a lot of shame that comes with it as well. Or imagine you choose watching Netflix every single night instead of working on something that will actually make progress in your life. And even though it will feel great in the very moment of just crashing in the couch and just starting to watch your favorite show, the price that you pay by choosing the path of the least resistance and just not engaging your brain and not developing yourself is that you actually will end up in a spot worse than you started in. The same goes for financial habits. If you constantly spend your money on things that you want in the very moment, means that you will never be able to save enough money to maybe retire early or to have a meaningful emergency saving fund. In all of those three examples, it's very important to just not give in to the instant gratification and just be able to postpone the gratification in order to progress and to end up in a better spot than we started in. However, the scary part is that our brains are wired to always choose the path of least resistance, which basically means that we first have to become aware of the fact that our brain will always choose the easy way out and that we ourselves have to introduce resistance in our life and tell our brain that we actually want to delay the gratification. And if we teach that little but very important fact to our brain, we will always give up when things get hard and we will never be able to reach the goals that we set for ourselves. The great news is that you are not born with the skill of delaying gratification. It is not in your DNA. It is something that has to be learned and exercised over a longer period of time, and once you have mastered this skill, reaching your goals will become so much easier for you. I am by no means a neuroscience expert, but Dr. Peter Stephen is, and he came up with a chimp paradox. In his book, The Chimp Paradox, Dr. Stephen Peters basically talks about how the brain is split into two parts. The one part is the limbic system and the other one the prefrontal cortex. One part of the brain is what he calls the chimp brain. The chimp brain, or the limbic part of our brain, is actually the part that gets developed the first as a child. So you can imagine that if you have a 2-year-old kid, it basically only functions on the limbic system. And the limbic system is responsible for all the instant reactions, the emotional and impulsive reactions that we have as humans. It's the part of our brain that usually responds the fastest and wants the pleasure right now in this immediate moment. Because the only task of the limbic system is to basically ensure our survival. And its main task is to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and to conserve energy. And because it's usually the first system that responds to any kind of new impulses, and it has the strong tendency to always conserve energy, we will always be inclined to choose the path of least resistance. However, there's also this other part of the brain which Dr. Steven Peterson calls the human brain. And this is usually the part of the brain that responds a little bit slower, takes a lot of energy, and usually gets developed in a later stage of life compared to the limbic system. Instead of reacting impulsive, emotional, and instant like in the limbic system, here in the prefrontal cortex we actually take more time and energy in order to come up with logical solutions and to plan actually for the future. Here we have the ability to delay our response and to also control what we want to say and how we want to react in certain situations. And the main task of the prefrontal cortex or the human brain is to ensure our future by planning, calculating, and considering options. And now I want you to imagine you came home from a long day, you're exhausted and tired, and you actually have to choose between doing a hard thing or an easy thing. Who do you think would win that argument, the chimp brain or the human brain? The problem is that especially in those kind of situations, the chimp brain usually wins, which means that you're giving in to instant gratification, you will end up on the couch watching Netflix, eating fast food, and paying the price down the line. And this comes back to what I said in the intro of the video, that if you look around us, technically everyone should be millionaires or walking around with a perfect six-pack. Because everyone knows what they have to do, all that information is publicly available. However, it's our chimp brain that keeps us from putting in consistent work and actually being able to delay our gratification to work on hard things. And the challenge of resisting the temptation gets harder over time because our lives get easier and more comfortable with any innovation that is introduced in the market. And we as a society have become so much worse of resisting any temptation that is thrown at us. If you compare our life to only 100 or 50 years ago, we have it so much easier and we have so many more temptations that are able to distract ourselves at any given time. And the key driver of that instant gratification which we now have access to is heavily linked to dopamine, which is the chemical that gets released in our brains once we get a reward. Thousands of years ago, when we were still hunters and gatherers, dopamine was released when we actually did hard things, like for example hunting down a wild animal or gathering some berries in the forest. Compare that to today, because we don't have to nearly work as hard for our dopamine spikes as our ancestor had to. Because we just have to take out our phone and we're immediately met with dopamine producing apps like TikTok, fast food on demand, or Amazon. And of course those kind of companies know exactly what they're doing, and they have weaponized dopamine against us, and they're basically holding us hostage in their business cases. I could go on forever on this dopamine topic, but this video is about delaying gratification, so if you want to learn more about dopamine, watch this video where I dive very deep into that topic. And here it's where it's getting interesting, because the same laws apply to AI tools just like ChatGPT. Because ChatGPT just opened up this massive opportunity for our chimp brains to always choose the path of least resistance, even when it comes to the heavy lifting of cognitive load. Because now that we actually have the opportunity to not use our brains as we should, you get your short-term win, but the long-term consequences is that your brain will get weaker and weaker over time. By the way, if you're interested in that topic, I made a video that you can watch right here, which is all about how we can stop the brain rot danger of ChatGPT and actually turn it into a tool that will make us smarter every single day. And now that we have understood the bridge between dopamine and instant gratification, we can move on and look at an experiment that has been conducted in order to prove that delaying your gratification can actually have a profound impact on all of our lives. In the 1960s, scientists actually ran the very famous marshmallow experiments. The kids were faced with a choice. They could have one marshmallow now or two marshmallows if they would wait for 15 minutes. And the interesting part was that the scientists were able to follow the kids' life for decades after the experiment has been finished, and they discovered that the kids that were able to resist the temptation of taking the one marshmallow and waited actually 15 minutes in order to get the second one had better test scores, better health, more money, and a generally better life compared to the other ones. And the results of this experiment basically shows that people who are able to resist the temptation have the ability to reap the fruits of their labor in the future. If that is putting the work in by getting in shape, eating healthy, having saving plans, or actually starting a company, everything can be achieved by just having this one skill of delaying your gratification. And it all points to the same truth: those who can resist the marshmallow have control over their future. Okay, but now back to us. Imagine we're now in the valley of death. Our motivation is low, rewards are absent, and we're wondering what the hell we're doing with our life. how are we able now to delay our gratification and to just keep pushing through it? I prepared a list of 3 things that you can work on right now in order to achieve exactly that. And the first thing that you can do in order to escape the valley of death is to introduce the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule is as simple as it gets, because the idea is to simply outsmart your chimp brain. So next time, if you feel a craving, try to pause and become conscious of the fact that you just have experienced a craving. And then instead of giving in, try to distract yourself for just 10 minutes. Maybe you can clean out the dishwasher, maybe you can fold your clothes, maybe you can go for a walk with your dog, but just don't give in to the urge of satisfying this craving. Because usually what happens after 10 minutes, you cannot even remember the craving and it has passed. And in fact, if it hasn't, maybe it's time that you just treat yourself to something. The second thing you can do is to put systems over a goal. And here's what I mean by that. The general idea is not to fall in love with results, but instead falling in love with systems that will eventually lead you to results. Because as we have established, motivation doesn't usually last very long. It is very high at the beginning and then basically drops, which means that we're ending up in the valley of death. And if you rely on external results in order to keep your motivation high, this will simply not work. Because there will be moments when the results don't mirror what you actually wanted and your motivation will drop. If you're completely attached to results, everything will collapse in that moment. You will lose all the motivation. You will lose the urge of keep pushing and just trying to work through this. So what you should do instead of attaching yourself to outcomes, to focus and concentrate on consistency and just doing what you have to do in that given moment, no matter the outcome. And the nice thing about that is that if you just keep doing that, results will magically appear. The third and last thing that you can do in order to escape the valley of death is to reframe the concept of pain. Because if you see pain just as a net negative in your life, this will not make it easier for you. What you can do instead is frame pain as an entry ticket to something greater in life. So next time you find yourself in the valley of death and you experience a lot of pain, boredom, and there's no motivation, just know that this is where you have to be. Because if there would be no pain, that also means that there will be no growth. And actually having that resistance means that if you overcome that resistance, that is actually where personal growth is happening. If there would be no pain, it would be too easy and everyone would be walking around with a perfect six-pack and with $1 million in their bank account. Also remember that if you feel the urge to escape the pain, it's not your human brain that is talking, but your chimp brain. And that is not a good sign. To summarize everything, life will really put you to the test in the valley of death. Your motivation will vanish, your chimp brain will scream, and rewards won't show for months or even sometimes years. But if you master delayed gratification, you will win no matter what. It's just a matter of time in that case. Because every time you resist the easy thing now, you're saying yes to the future that you actually want. So go ahead and start building it. So let me ask you, in what area of your life will you delay gratification this week? Will it be fast food, finances, Netflix, or AI? Drop it in the comments. I will be reading and replying to all of them. And if you want more videos on building discipline and self-improvement, hit subscribe. Because the next time you're in the valley of death, you will want this reminder. So see you in the next video.